Today I'm going to be talking about some of the results we had from some recent trials where we're using kiln heating and vacuum steam to sanitize infested Ohia logs. So why would we be treating logs? Well, of course, there's a lot of demand for Ohia wood on the island, and movement of diseased material is a way that diseases spread. Luckily, the state of Hawaii very quickly enacted this inter-island quarantine, which meant that anything that was destined for off-island use had to be screened through a genetic test, a very sensitive genetic test, and deemed negative for the pathogen before it was allowed to move off-island. But there was no actual treatment method. So our goal was to develop a treatment schedule that can just essentially kill all the Ceratocystis fungi living in these logs so that you don't even have to do the DNA test. The idea is just everything gets treated with an effective phytosanitary procedure. We've tested two different methods. One is kiln heating and the other is vacuum steam. So the first trial was for kiln heating, and it's called an evaporative dry kiln. It's in Hilo already. It's used predominantly for wood flooring, all different species. We were lucky enough that the owner would let us put our wood material in there free of charge. And we were testing a heating schedule of 60 degrees Celsius for 60 minutes, which is a common phytosanitary schedule that's used across the world for wood and wood packing material. We did two trials, one in June and one in September of 2018. And for this trial, we ended up using artificially inoculated trees that are about 2 to 5 inches in diameter. So these are fairly small trees. That's a spray paint can right there, just to give you some scale. So these are what we call Ohia poles. So what we do is we cut off 30 centimeters off the bottom and the top end of the pole, and we do these carrot baiting assays to get a baseline fungus rate, basically how colonized are they. And then we also took moisture content readings, which is more for the production side of seeing how well it dries the wood down. The logs had temperature probes inserted so that we can monitor the temperature profile of these trees to know when they hit that 60 degrees Celsius target temperature that we're looking for. Before they go into the kiln, we leave some trees outside as negative control, so they never enter the kiln. And those were just left outside in a covered area at just ambient Hilo temperature, because we want to see how does just leaving trees out and letting them dry out for a month compare to actually putting them into the kiln to make sure to see if there's an actual difference between the two. Pieces that were destined for the kiln were put on the top, which you can have a photo. And this is Blaine Louise, a technician at ARS, and he's feeding the Ohia logs at the very top of this kiln. You can see our logs were very small, maybe 1% of total volume that fits in this kiln. It's a pretty massive kiln. The door is sealed, it's turned on, and then we just wait for the kiln run to happen. This is the temperature profile of the logs, temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. So that red circle is the 60 degrees Celsius or 140 degrees Fahrenheit. That's our target temperature. And then these colored lines are the logs that are at ambient temperature. So that's just what you're seeing is the day and night Hilo temperatures. And then the black lines is the actual logs in the kiln. But at the end, he kicks it up to 140 degrees, and it sits there for a minimum of 1 hour, and then the kiln is turned off. We open it up later, and we collect our logs, and then we do these carrot baiting assays. We did two different depths. One was up to a 1 centimeter outer depth and a 2 centimeter inner depth. This isn't to scale, so if you go to 2 centimeters on all sides, you're essentially covering the whole disc itself. Pieces of wood are chipped off with a sterilized chisel, placed in a little carrot sandwich, and if you have viable Ceratocystis living in these pieces of wood, what will happen within about a week to a month is you'll get the fungus starting to grow on the carrot piece itself, which is what's shown by that grayish discoloration. So that is what I'm calling a viability assay. So that is a positive viability assay right there. If the Ceratocystis is dead, you just basically have a carrot that sits there for a month with no fungus. So the results for this trial is We did, in our June trial, we had 10 poles in the kiln and 2 that were left out as controls. The pre-treatment viability of all of them, all 12 poles, was, 89%. So out of 191 carat baits, 169 were positive. So that's showing before everything goes in the kiln, it's fairly thoroughly colonized by these Ceratocystis fungi. The treatments, post-treatment, everything that was left outside of the kiln, it was only 2 logs. It was Ceratocystis leuco-Ohia colonized log and a Ceratocystis hulio-Ohia colonized log, 94% viable. So leaving logs just in ambient helo temperature doesn't do much to degrade the viability. But everything in the kiln was successfully eradicated. Out of all our carat baits, nothing was viable. So a successful run. Similar to the second trial where we added a few more poles, pre-treatment viability was 93% out of 288 carat baits. Post-treatment, everything that was left outside ambient, those 2 poles were 72% viable. So there was a drop, but nothing that would be significant in phytosanitary measures. Inside the kiln, again, it was completely eradicated, the fungi. So out of a total of almost 400 baits, we had 0 that were positive or viable fungus. So it was a completely successful kiln run, completely eradicated these fungi. Moving on, we did another trial with what's called a vacuum steam unit. This is the vacuum steam unit right here. It's in a portable trailer. And what it does is there's a vacuum chamber. It removes all the air from the chamber and then introduces in steam, superheated steam. And what that does is, because it has a vacuum, it's able to penetrate very deeply and quickly. So it's cheaper, faster, and uses less energy just because it's such a fast run. It's also portable and multi-use. Anything that you would want to steam sanitize or sanitize with steam could be used with this machine. Show you what it looks like. This is inside the trailer. This is the portable test unit. So these can be built to any specifications, but for our trials, we would just use this, the portable one. This is the plumbing behind it with the steam generator and the vacuum pump, and then just showing what it looks like with logs inside the steam unit. So for this trial, we were testing much larger diameter wood, 18 to 24 inches in diameter. We used naturally infected trees that we found at 2 sites that had a lot of rapid Ohia death occurring at the time. So because they were naturally infected, it was a mixture of Ceratocystis leuco-Ohia and hulio-Ohia trees, verified first by this molecular test. We were testing 2 heat regimes. These are both those international phytosanitary standards. One is at 56 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, and then the 60 Celsius for 60 minutes. At 70% of the log core, and that's based off of the work previously. We know how deep the fungus goes in, so that is our target depth. So this is just showing what it looks like. You have each kiln charge was 3 logs of relatively the same diameter. They're put on a pallet, strapped in, forklifted into the vacuum steam chamber. Drs. Chen and White drill their holes at various depths. Insert the temperature probes, and those probes are connected to a computer on the outside of the kiln, and then they monitor in real time how these logs are heating up. So this is the temperature output, and here you can see the different probes and the different degrees where the different locations in the log are at. Compared to the kiln runs, which the first run I think was about 23 days. The second run was about 33 days. This can take care of much larger logs from anywhere from 10 to 16 hours. So it's done in 1 day. Again, the sampling was the same, but we went to a much deeper depth. So this is half of a disc, and we sample at 3 and 5 centimeter depths. So we ended up initially choosing 34 logs, but 4 of them were just non-viable duds. They didn't have living fungus in them. So those were immediately removed from the data set, and we were looking at 30 logs in total. We did pre-treatment, about almost 1,000 carat bait assays, and the viability ranged from anywhere from 9.5% to 47% in the log. So that's showing you how variable, field logs in the field can be. But on average, there's about 20% viability pre-treatment. Ambient controls were very similar at 20% viability. The 56C treatment, we did 488 carrot baits, and 1 out of those 488 was positive. So it was 0.021% viable. We got 1/5 of 1% of our baits were viable. And for the 60/60 treatment, we had 0 viable carrot baits. So that kiln run worked perfectly again. So the conclusion, I guess, from these studies is that kiln heating, vacuum steam, these heat treatments can effectively eradicate ceratocystis fungi from the logs. Something I didn't really talk about is after the kiln heating and the vacuum steam treatment, we try to reinfect the logs, as in if they went in the kiln, got heated, and got put back in the yard, can they get rot again? And none of the logs. The wood is too dry. It's just pretty much impossible to reinfect these trees at the high degree that we tried. So once they get treated, they're free from rot, and they can never get rot again, essentially. So it's very effective. Just quickly, I got about 30 seconds to talk about some other things. We are doing some fungicidal injections with the goal of protecting trees from getting rot. So if you have a tree of value that you want to protect, the idea is to get inject it with these propiconazole-based fungicides. And we're working with a company, Arborjet. And we're in our second year of trials right now. Currently, the trees injected a year ago or with the propazole product are 100% asymptomatic, so it seems to be working well, but we have to monitor these trees over time because these treatments don't last forever necessarily, so we're trying to get an idea of how long they last. What's good is it's much cheaper than removal of a large tree, and it's worked in similar diseases, oak wilt, Dutch elm disease, so these vascular wilt diseases are very aggressive pathogens. And with that, I'll just end right there. I'd like to say thank you to everyone that's supported this work. Everyone in this icon played some role in these specific projects, and the rest of the team.